Allow me to welcome all of you in this very cozy atmosphere in Hotel Avalon, where we are going to discuss very important issues. The philosophy behind this conference is very simple. A few months ago, Latvia ended up its presidency in the EU Council, and one of Latvian priorities in the EU Presidency Council was to keep high on the agenda cooperation with Central Asia. And during Latvian presidency, as you may know, European Commission, together with member states, redrafted, reconsidered, and rediscussed already adopted in 2007 EU strategy for Central Asia. So now European External Action Service is in charge of putting forward concrete proposals how to proceed in the most efficient way. So therefore this conference is very timely because the results of our discussions, different recommendations and policy proposals will be comprised later on in the report, which will be, I don't know whether in full or summary, will be available, and ideas will be definitely passed over to European Commission and External Action Service for consideration further on when they will be working on implementation of the strategy. First of all, I would like to thank all participants of the conference because we have guests coming from very far away because, again, philosophy of this conference was based not on talking ourselves, but more on listening what people from specialists, experts, politicians from the region are telling us and sharing their experiences. So thank you very much for coming so long way to Latvia. I also want to thank organizers of this conference, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who are very, very supportive in putting together this conference, and also a team of Latvian Transatlantic Organization, who also supported the implementation of the concept of discussions on Central Asia. So thank you very much for coming. I really encourage everybody to actively take part and to discuss, ask questions, and put forward ideas. And I will make sure that these ideas will be heard after this conference. And now I will pass the floor to Andris Strasts from Latvian Bank, who is going to chair the first session on economic cooperation, because economy, as we know, is the foundation of everything. So please, Andris.
Okay, yeah, so is this on? Yes. So thank you, Janet. Thank you for inviting me to chair this panel. So my name is Andris, as you heard. So today is the Names Day for Andris in Latvia. So you are my Names Day present, and Names Days are very important in Latvia, as you might know. So with that, I would like to invite here to the front the panelists for the first session. So please. And as you take the floor, I will try to introduce you. In the order they have now taken their seats. So we start on the far left with Ambassador Hayri Hayret Yalau, the ambassador of Turkey to Latvia. So ambassador has been serving in foreign affairs for a long time. So actually I calculated that he started at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Turkey 3 years after I was born. So he has a wealth of experience to share, I'm sure. So next to him is Dr. Luca Anceski, who is from Glasgow actually. So Viva la Escocia Libre. But actually he's a researcher on Central Asian matters and also has a wealth of publications. Then we have Dr. Yasher Sari, who is currently working as professor in two universities, a university in Bolu, Turkey, and another university in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan. So that's also what academics in Latvia actually frequently do. They teach at two universities just to survive. And finally, last but not least, it's Mr. Saken Mukan, who is from Kazakhstan, but he's actually now teaching in the advanced program in law and economics at the Riga Graduate School of Law. So he's just next door to the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga, where I also spend still a little bit of my time. So he's in a way a competitor. I always wonder why they teach economics at this graduate school of law, but maybe we can discuss that in the coffee break. But anyway, with that, actually, I have now introduced the speakers and myself. I would like to give just a little bit of background against which this discussion is taking place. So, Jeanette already mentioned that Central Asia, so EU relations with Central Asia, were one of the priorities of the Latvian presidency in the EU Council. But now if we just look at what happened yesterday or last night, what's happening today or going to happen today, so there are some broader events going on. And in particular, you saw last night, so the heads of state and government of the EU meeting with their counterpart, with their Turkish counterpart, so quite a lengthy press statement. Also after that, probably the ambassador can give us a little bit more detail on that later, so I will not steal the talk from him. But then the other event that is going to happen today, actually, the board of directors of the International Monetary Fund are going to meet. So now they are still sleeping in Washington. It's night, but they will meet later today. And when they meet, they will decide on including the Chinese yuan in the special drawing rights basket, so in the reserve currency basket of the International Monetary Fund. So Chinese yuan will become the kind of fifth, or actually will become, I guess, the third most important reserve currency right away after this anticipated decision. So China is definitely rising, is still rising, and of course that has an impact also on this discussion and has an impact on the Central Asian region. But with this brief background, so this is the longest you heard from me, so I will not try to interfere too much, just to set a direction for what's going on in the panel. And actually, I would like to start with Mr. Mukan and ask him about the situation in Kazakhstan in particular, and the potential for cooperation with. I guess you cannot ignore China there as well, and with the EU, of course, in particular, and maybe in answering your. Or giving your initial remarks, you can also answer a question I have always wondered. I mean, Russia and Kazakhstan, okay, they're not equal in terms of their economic structure, but they're still fairly similar. So they're both kind of resource-driven economies. So what's the point of having a customs union between them? So wouldn't it make more sense to have a customs union with China, for example? So Kazakhstan and China would make more sense to me. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for giving the floor. From the perspective of Kazakhstan, the cooperations between Central Asia and EU actually is also one of the priority of the foreign policy by Kazakhstan that is today is also taking place in the agenda of the Kazakhstan's foreign policy at all. But before coming to that point of view, before talking about the Central Asia and the EU cooperation perspectives, I would like to answer for the questions of by Mr. Stras on the why do Kazakhstan has so close cooperation with Russia in terms of the custom unions and creating the Eurasian Economic Union, not taking into account the Chinese potential to cooperate closely with China and so forth. We should. There is one of the most important accent point here is that Kazakhstan is the world's largest landlocked country. This is really critical for Kazakhstan, and since getting independence, the Republic of Kazakhstan started to conduct a so-called multivectoral policy to invest, to attract the foreign investment not only from Russia and China but also from the Western countries. So this multivectoral policy says that has taking into account the good neighboring relationships with the neighbors first, and then the relationship with the other countries in terms of the attracting investment. This is one of the main priority of the foreign policy that Kazakhstan pursued. So in this sense, in 1994, actually, when people say about the Eurasian Economic Union, automatically, especially in Western academic society, actually Russian run the Eurasian Economic Union. But if you're talking about the historical preconditions of creating this union, we can understand, and we can see that in 1994, President Nazarbayev announced in front of the faculty member of the Lomonosov University in Moscow the idea of the creation of Eurasian Union. The idea is that, of course, the Kazakhstan is pursuing its own national interest in terms of the transferring its own in terms of the exporting its own potential via the countries who are neighborings. At the same time, having the so-called involved in integration process. For Kazakhstan, integration process activities is really important in terms of being taking into account that is the largest landlocked country, and in these terms, that this historical movement actually started not so quickly, because in Central Asian countries, not all Central Asian countries already agreed on terms of the Eurasian idea, that taking account that it could be bring into the past historical, taking into account that the historical perspective was the Russian influence or the recreating Soviet Union, actually. So in this case, that the Eurasian Economic Union was that project that would be able that Kazakhstan to have its own national interest in terms of the exporting its own goods via Russia, for example, or for other kind of pipeline projects. So this was one of the main priority of the Kazakhstan foreign policy, to be involved into integration process due its own geopolitical locations. In terms of the why not China, why China is not that kind of country that we would be able to cooperate closely rather than resource-driven economies that Russia has today, the similar economic policy that Kazakhstan is doing, actually. This is probably, I would say, from historical perspectives also, because it's really sensitive for Central Asians, especially for Kazakhstan, to have that kind of barrier with the Kazakhstan, with the Central Asian countries and China, in terms of that the China itself actually, in terms of population, could that restrict the Chinese population. Just in terms of the population, that restrict the Chinese population come to Central Asia, and the restrict actually barrier not to let the Chinese population come to Kazakhstan, and of course doing its own soft power issues in terms of the in terms of the population in China. So, but the second idea that of course that I would like to point out is that, as we know, that China is a huge country, and Western China is not well developed in comparison with Eastern China, and there is no that was no mean to cooperate closely with China in terms of that Western China that is bordering with Central Asian countries. That there are that for Chinese actually for Chinese companies, for Chinese administration, it was beneficial to have the pipeline projects from the Central Asian countries only to consume the or to benefit to consume the western part of China. So in these terms, with China, basically we are in that cooperation, basically via the Shanghai Cooperation Organizations. That is also just has its own agenda on that time. But basically, in terms of really just it's really interesting for me also to find out that kind of issues that the Eurasian Economic Union actually is not only that. Production projects that would be able to contribute its beneficial idea only for Russians, but also for the huge market as for Kazakhstan. That at least we see the benefits on now, not only for just for temporary time, but also for the long-term perspective. So that's the main issues that, of course, that the idea that. Eurasian Economic Union, I would say that it was the project by the Kazakhstan we initiated, and it works, and anyhow there are skeptics comes, but also anyhow from long-term strategy it is one of the, I don't know, it is, at least we hope that it will bring the benefits and so forth.
Okay, so now I have to press you or push you a bit more on the Kazakhstan EU perspective. So what's the role of the EU in the whole thing? So okay, China, you're kind of a bit hesitant, too much cooperation in particular with the western part of China. Does this Eurasian Union thing restrict in any way cooperation between Kazakhstan and European Union?
The most important issues that in this case that we're going to have the enhanced agreement, cooperation agreement with EU that will be signed in December this year. And take into, because the last one was updated in 1999 between Kazakhstan and EU actually, and it works despite of the preconditions of creating the Eurasian Economic Union. But being in the Eurasian Economic Union, the following such so-called multi-vector policy that is conducting by Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan achieved this kind of the agreement with the EU. I think with Barroso, President Nazarbayev signed a preliminary agreement in November 2014, and then in the 1st of January 2015, Eurasian Economic Union started to conduct its own activity in terms of the identifying that the Eurasian Economic Union is also the initial project that would be run for the future perspective. In this case, my answer is just following this multi-vector policy. The Kazakhstan is going to sign to enhance the cooperation agreement with EU, and I have just arrived from the Brussels that we also in the EU External Action Service also is broadly discussing about this agreement in terms of what can Kazakhstan be able to have, what Kazakhstan can give to EU, and what kind of the measures would be taken by EU in terms of the being a part of Eurasian Economic Union by Kazakhstan. So this is our really just interesting projects in terms of the mutual cooperations and mutual benefits, not only just asking for something and giving the back, asking for something and giving back nothing. Just this is quite mutual understanding, mutual beneficial project that that for future generations, I hope that it will give its own fruits.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for these initial remarks and also for answering my question. As the next one, I would like to give floor to Dr. Sari. And in particular, my question would be, of course, Kazakhstan is the largest by population, by any means, country in the Central Asia. But Central Asia is not only Kazakhstan, so there are also other countries. And in particular, there are countries which are not as resource rich, such as Kurdistan and Tajikistan. So in particular, I know that you have a wealth of experience in Kurdistan. So maybe you can share your view.
First, I would like to thank the Foreign Minister of Republic of Latvia and the Latvian Transatlantic Organization and Center for International Studies. Coming from the other side of the former Soviet Union to the Baltic state, it's giving me opportunity to see some differences these two regions. Kurdistan, yes, Kurdistan is one of the smallest country in Central Asia, and of course, previous speaker talked about the Kazakhstan. Kyrgyzstan, because of the small state, has a different approach on the different issues. As you know, Kyrgyzstan at the beginning of 2015 entered the Eurasian Economic Union. But the president of the Kyrgyzstan, Almazbek Atambayev, to convince his people, and he said, yes, we are choosing the lesser evil, no offense to member state of this organization. So Kyrgyzstan didn't have much opportunity, much alternative to choose in that sense. To explain the Kyrgyzstan choice, we need to first look at what a small state can do, because Kyrgyzstan can consider as a small state. A small state have been observed to be different from their larger neighbor, like Kazakhstan in case of Kyrgyzstan, and they have different economic structure, and their domestic policy making framework also different. So for that reason, the Kyrgyzstan as a small state need to act differently in security policy, in international relation, and relation with the international organization or regional organization, such as European Union. So there is a definition on this small state. I won't go over that one because I prepared as an academic presentation, but I understand that this is more discussion, these presentations are more based on the discussion. So there's an area, Kyrgyzstan is a small country, I mean, almost 200,000 kilometers square, and recently they reached 6 million people. And their GDP is nominal $6.7 billion, and per capita is just over $1,000. Landlocked, mountainous, the country. This is the Kyrgyz economy depends on the agricultural products and trade. But comparing the other neighboring country, Kyrgyzstan has their economic transformation earlier than the other countries. The first country passed its own national currency, SOM, and the first country in the region became the member of World Trade Organization in 1998. And this is, of course, and also use shock therapy policy to change the economic structure, but that causes a lot of problem in Kyrgyzstan. The industrial sector is collapsed, and Kyrgyzstan depend on the re-exporting the goods from China. I didn't touch if you look at Kyrgyzstan neighboring countries, the east part is China, the south is the Tajikistan, the west is the Uzbekistan, and north is Kazakhstan. So Kyrgyzstan became a country transporting Chinese goods to other countries. especially in the southern region near the Uzbek border, Karasu Bazaar area, and near the Bishkek, the Alamaddin Bazaar. Those products, Chinese products, coming to Kyrgyzstan and distributing Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Russia and other countries. This trade became the 1/3 of the whole GDP of the Kyrgyzstan. So this is the important part, and also inside the country, the biggest the employment opportunity for the Kyrgyz people. So the 85% of their products, Chinese products, coming to Kyrgyzstan, re-exported to Russia and Kazakhstan. So if you look at Kyrgyzstan, there is economically no significant production except natural resources, gold, not as big as the Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan has as a natural resources. But still, this gold mining, which is the Canadian company Centrālāzija is doing this one, is the 52% of the whole Kyrgyz export covering. And Kyrgyzstan depends on the foreign aids, and especially European Union has supporting development project in the country. But one of the main resources of its main resource of the Kyrgyzstan is the remittances, labor remittances coming from Russia and the Kazakhstan, especially in Russia. More than 670,000 Kyrgyz people are living, and this is remittances is the 35% of the whole Kyrgyzstan GDP. That is the huge number. This is remind me in 1970s, 60s, 70s, Turkey had the depends on the remittance. Okay. So when we look the export-import partners, we can see, the export countries is written as Switzerland. The reason is the Switzerland is not that they have the high trade, but because of those gold mined in Kyrgyzstan is going to Switzerland, but this Canadian company taking the Switzerland. The Switzerland, Kazakhstan, Russia, Uzbekistan, China, Turkey is the main export partner, and the import is the mainly Russia, China, Kazakhstan, we can see. So this is very clearly, you can see that Kyrgyzstan economically depends on the Russia because of the strategic products like the oil, gas, mainly coming from Russia, and also 35% of remittances coming laborers who are working in Russia. So what is the advantages of joining the Eurasian Economic Union for the Kyrgyzstan? First, trade with the Eurasian Custom Union countries, a custom revenue will increase. This is the one example. Kyrgyzstan has border with China and they are trading. According to Chinese statistic, the Chinese are selling the $9 billion products, but according to Kyrgyz statistic, it's the over $1 billion. So $8 billion Chinese product when they are entering the country is not, paying the taxes in that sense. So border security will ensure, investment and labor remittances will increase. What is the disadvantage of joining the Eurasian economy? First, losing its re-export character. The bazaars becoming smaller, less people will employ, they will lose job, and they will start looking for new opportunities. So on that way, unemployment of people working in those bazaars will increase. And second is the rise of the consumer products, goods, because of higher custom tax will increase the product. And when we compare the advantages and disadvantages, we can say that economic disadvantages outweigh the economic advantages. So economically, the joining Kyrgyzstan to the Eurasian Economic Custom Union is the problem. So then the puzzle, why then Kyrgyzstan joining? So the puzzle is then we need to look at the non-economic variables, which is why push the Kyrgyzstan decide to joining this union. First is the dependency on the Russia, economic weaknesses, access to a larger market, cultural hegemony of Russian in the region, especially in Kurdistan, and bandwagoning effect and security concern, especially related with Uzbekistan and a certain level with the China. So, as a small state, when they are joining the economic union, they look at several factors. Economic one, small states have small domestic market. External trade constitutes higher portion of the GDP. Therefore, small states seek the preferential trade agreement and economic integration. And this is another way to explain. If a small state already depends on a powerful state, in this case is the Russia, it's easier to make integration decisions because Kurdistan can getting some subsidized products from the Russia. For example, they are paying less oil and the gas in that sense comparatively. In security part, small state security decision. Either small state need to be neutral, like Turkmenistan did officially, or finding powerful friend like bandwagoning, joining the locomotive to secure itself. And we see that Kyrgyzstan, because of the Central Asian area, is very vulnerable, close to Afghanistan, and security issues are becoming the important issues. Then, because of the Kyrgyzstan cannot provide security its own border, then looking for the possible alternative. That's the one reason why it has closed. The other one is the cultural or more legacy of past, we can say. I understand that Latvia is the past those legacy and not depend on what is in the past and become the more the integrated the European Union. But the Kyrgyzstan and other Central Asian countries, it's difficult to pass that legacy. So we see the kind of ideological hegemony, powerful state pushing the countries to the elites in the small countries, educated by the Soviet time, and they consider is the Russia as the way to modernize their country, the way to open the world. So this is the nostalgia of the Soviet Union and the seeing Russia as a modern example for their own state. Leadership, of course, leaders also as an actor play important role because leadership is trying to consolidate their power. It will be easy to get external support to staying in power. Comparing the other Central Asian countries, Kyrgyzstan is the more democratic. The regime is the 2 times overthrown by the people. So the leaders who want to stay in power need to have support. If they cannot get the support internally, then they are looking for the outside sources, which in international relation we call only balancing. So then these cases we can develop a working hypothesis, and I will finish this here. For small state, other factors such as security concern, cultural hegemony, leadership play strong role in joining economic union, despite economic is not viable. Because of the Kyrgyzstan depends on Russia, security concern, fear of China and the Uzbekistan, continuation of the Russian cultural hegemony on the elites, Kyrgyzstan decided to join Eurasian custom union. One last thing is my colleague is told about 1994, the Nazarbayev in the Moscow to put the idea of the Eurasian Economic Union. We need to look to international regional conjecture in that time too. In 1994, is the Russian nationalism is rising, and in the Russian Duma, nationalists started talking about the creating the Soviet Union again, and that is the Nazarbayev is to see this is problematic. Then he put the idea of the creating loose Union. But Nazarbayev idea is the economic one, not the political one. He's emphasizing. But today we see the Putin's Eurasian economic union. They see it as one step to reaching the political union. In that sense, the Nazarbayev's understanding of Eurasia and union is different than the Putin's understanding of Eurasia and union. And similar to Eurasia as a concept, yes, it can be a geographical concept, but also a political, ideological concept. It's not just Russia. In Turkey also, people is thinking and talking about the Eurasia and the bringing together those Eurasian countries together. Thank you so much.
So one quick follow-up question, though, from me actually. So we saw, in case of Kazakhstan, this kind of more multilateral approach. So in case of Kyrgyzstan, I understand it's more a bilateral thing with Russia. Okay, I'm exaggerating that a bit, but given that, so where do you see the future for Kyrgyzstan and EU relations?
Okay, first thing is the all Central Asian countries. 15 days ago, I was in Turkmenistan. And all Central Asian countries are saying that their foreign policy is based on multilateral, multidimensional foreign policy. But in reality, and the rhetoric is different. So in that sense, Kyrgyzstan, if you look at the Kyrgyzstan concepts of foreign policy of Kyrgyzstan, is saying multilateral, multidimensional, multi-layer foreign policy. But if we yes, Kyrgyzstan has very good relation with European countries, Turkey and other countries. But if we look at strategic issues, strategic economic issues, political issues, Kyrgyzstan more tend to close to Russia than the other countries. For that reason, we cannot say the reality Kyrgyzstan has the multilateral foreign policy. Well, yes, we can say multilateral diplomacy. That is different than having the foreign policy. European Union relation with the Kyrgyzstan is the European Union as an organization and European countries as interest on the Central Asia has very close relation with Kyrgyzstan. But that relation is limited. Mainly European Union was funding the development projects and democratization process of the Kyrgyzstan. In that sense, different than the other Central Asian countries, relation between European Union and Kyrgyzstan, because Kyrgyzstan is more open, more democratic. So then the European Union's funding, supporting democratic institutions, civil society, and also some the economic, and also the issues with is problematic for the Kyrgyzstan, like border issues with the neighboring countries, the water issues, which is one of the most important issue in the future in Central Asia. So in 2007, when the Germany became the president of the European Union, published the first strategic policy for the Central Asia for European countries, and good to Latvia is to continue that tradition and putting the emphasis on the Central Asian region.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. So I'm sorry, I will now pass Luca and give floor to the ambassador, because I think the logical sequence is you have Central Asian countries, and then you have Turkey, and then you have the European Union. So Turkey is an important link, in particular if you speak about energy potential. Energy cooperation between Central Asia and the EU, and of course I wonder also whether you would like to comment briefly on last night's summit between the EU and Turkey.
I think one of the first things that we have to emphasize when we look at Central Asia is all the countries in Central Asia are very much dependent on a couple of issues. One of them is security. The second one is stability, because without these two, it is impossible for them to economically develop themselves. So there is enormous, shall we say, emphasis on security and stability. So that is one of the reasons why there is, I mean, as you can understand from the presentations, there is enormous emphasis in these countries on security. Who is going to supply security for this area is an important issue. And I think after the Americans have abdicated Central Asia from Central Asia, this has been taken over by Russia. So, in the security sphere, it is Russia. The second thing has to do with stability. What do we mean by stability? That means, how do you keep the present status of government in place in terms of not very democratic structures? And this has to do also with strong leadership, but I think except Kyrgyzstan, we have to accept the fact that there is enormous emphasis in these countries on stability, and with stability comes certain norms which are not, shall we say, in line with what the European Union would expect. So, in those two important issues, Russia has been very helpful in the sense that they have always supported strong leadership in these countries, and they have always supported security. One of the difficulties all of these countries have has to do with threats emanating from Afghanistan. Why Afghanistan? We haven't spoken about Afghanistan. It is the Islamization of the society. And as you know, in all of these countries, the most organized, shall we say, opposition is always religious. So there is also, this is seen as a common threat by all these countries in the region. And that is the reason why one of the most important issues in Shanghai Treaty has to do with how do we look at Islam in this area. So these are the things that I wanted to add. Regarding Turkey, first of all, since the dissolution of the Soviet Empire, we have looked at the situation from a little bit different perspective. Because when we first entered Central Asia, we saw that the economic situation was terrible. Let me give you a couple of examples. In Kazakhstan, they were not able to produce bread. And one of the first exports and main exports to Kazakhstan was factories which would produce in large quantities bread. And how do you make flour? How do you make the necessary flour, mix the flour with water and this and that for bread? About Tajikistan, they didn't know how to repair cars and car parts. Which car parts to use? So we were very much involved in these small things in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and this was done by an organization that we have called TICA. TICA has supplied the necessary staff for small enterprises, small shops and things of this sort. And I think it is running to something close to $3.5 billion worth of training and also help for these small shops and industrial, shall we say, small and medium-sized enterprises. The second thing which we have done, because people are always looking at the energy issues, but we spent much more time and much more effort in training the technicians who were necessary, because once the Russians left, there were no technicians and there were no engineers to take care of the infrastructure. We have also helped countries like Uzbekistan, where they had a lot of difficulty in terms of environmental difficulties. In how do you do environmental friendly agriculture in those countries? That's how we. But more than that, how do you collect taxes? How do you run a country? And that is one of the areas that we help these countries by bringing in not only military officers and this, but also government in terms of financial bureaucracy, bureaucracy in terms of how do you run a country, policing, and how do you administer. All of these are the areas where we helped by training. The second thing we did was with the Exim Bank. We tried to help the people to form small enterprises. And these small enterprises have been very active in all of these countries. Because when you look at the large enterprises, a lot of them have to do with energy, gas or oil. Because what Russia has done is, before it has left Central Asia, it has signed a lot of contracts whereby they get oil, gas from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and they get it for a very cheap price, and they sell their products, the same products, to Europe or to other countries with almost a 30% profit, sometimes much more than that. So when you look at the large investments, when you look at the large industrial or energy issues, it is always Russia. Lukoil, Rosneft have been very, very active. But when you look at the medium-sized, small-sized industries, Turkey has been very active in those senses. But who else has been very active lately? We also have to look at Korea, who has been very active in Uzbekistan, and we have to look at China, because I think the elephant in the room is China. China has been developing its infrastructure very smartly, and they are tying the Southeast Asia through China with Central Asia and with Europe. And when you look at the infrastructure projects which have been initiated by China over Kazakhstan to the Caspian Sea, or over Kazakhstan and Russia to Europe, all of these see the marks of China. So China is going to be a very important player also in the future. For the time being, they have refrained from issues which relate to security. They are much more, shall we say, concentrated in economic issues and in getting natural resources from these countries. In terms of large projects, Turkey has been very much interested in transportation. Transportation from China to Europe, transportation from China to Africa. So we have been working on a railway line from Urumqi through Kazakhstan, coming to Aktau, and from the Aktau with the ferry to Baku, and from Baku with the railway line, which is uninterrupted. There is only, I think we have 2 or 3 months to complete the tunnels between us and Georgia, and you will have access, railroad access, all the way to London or all the way to Madrid. So this is what we call the middle or the medium line. Another country which has been trying to get into Central Asia has been India. India, there is one difficulty with India. It has been transportation, in the sense that they don't have direct connection. They have been trying to improve this situation, going through Iran, which is Bandar Abbas. From all the Indian products will go through Iran, then go to Turkmenistan from that area. But at the end, when we look at Central Asia in terms of energy matters, I can also talk about what we are trying to do with getting Turkmenistan to be part of TANAP. And also, if there are other possibilities, because we already have signed a contract with Azerbaijan, and the gas fields between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan are very close to, it can be connected. And there is a possibility for Turkmen gas to be delivered to Europe. And I think we'll talk about this too. But the thing which has changing the whole issue in this sense has to do with what is happening in the Caspian Sea. We have to see the firing of cruise missiles by Russians in the Caspian Sea as a threat to peace and cooperation in the Caspian Sea. Because this is not something normal. You do not fire missiles from a sea which is supposed to be a sea of stability, cooperation, and peace to other countries in the region. So we have to, I think one of the things that the European Union can help solve is the situation on the Caspian. How do you do the delimitation of borders on the Caspian? And this is going to be a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Luca, you now have the difficult task. You're the last speaker on last but not least, of course, the last speaker on the panel for the introductory remarks. I guess there will be much more than that afterwards. We still have quite a lot of time. But I think one issue that is not yet covered, or what has not been addressed, is this kind of diversification. In particular in the resource-rich Central Asian countries away from a resource-driven economy. In particular, I know that Kazakhstan has at least had some thoughts on that. So if you would maybe address that situation in particular in the light of the oil price now being where it is, and the gas price as well. So if that situation persists, so what's the future for these Central Asian, in particular the resource-rich Central Asian countries?
It's not a good future. I'm afraid I like to be pessimistic. If you look at the structures of the economies of the big energy production states, which are Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, and if you look at the structure in '92, it's pretty much the same as you got now in 2015. There hasn't been an effort at diversification. There hasn't been just a talk, really, mostly in Kazakhstan, about diversifying. But in practical terms, nothing has changed. The economy was very much dependent on energy in '92, and it's very much dependent in energy, which is oil in Kazakhstan and gas in Turkmenistan in 2015. Now, if the prices stayed up, that would have been a positive outlook for the elite short term. But the prices didn't stay up. In fact, they went down. And that created a series of problems and instigated two crises. I'm going to quickly elaborate on the two. I have been arguing for a while that Central Asia's big producer states, energy producer states, are going to separate but somehow closely related crisis. Turkmenistan got an export crisis and Kazakhstan got a production crisis. Turkmenistan got an export crisis because Gazprom withdrew from Central Asia. They announced they will withdraw, and in 2025 they will be out of the market in the region completely. If you look at statistics up to 4 or 5 years ago, they were buying anything in between 32 and 38 BCM per year from Turkmenistan. Last year they bought 4. The two short pipelines which connect Turkmenistan with Iran are short, but there is some capability there. But Iran has been hedging their bets with the post-sanctions scenario, and they have been sending mixed messages whether or not these pipelines will keep working. In fact, my bet is that they will shut down, which leaves Turkmenistan with an exclusive relationship with China. We got to the point at which the 2009 pipeline, which was supposed to be the symbol of route diversification, the symbol of multivectorism, the success of an energy policy which Niazov first and Bernie Mohamedov then employed, in fact has become an obstacle to the development of a serious export policy for Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is now in the very awkward position of being 100% dependent on China in 10-15 years. And that was sort of manageable with high oil prices and in turn high gas prices. It's very unmanageable now. Also because, so on the one hand, they are selling the same produce at a much lower price. But even when it comes to the income, to the cash revenues into Turkmenistan, they're not getting anything because the way in which the deals were structured, that's a much understood. China paid for the pipeline and they paid for the exploration investment in Gakinish, which means that Turkmenistan is not getting any money for those deals. And now they have an awkward position in which they export 40 BCM, although they don't have a good tradition, good form, we say, in fulfilling the quota every year. In fact, they haven't, only to China, which not only is operating in a system of low oil prices, but could renegotiate at any time. And that's their first crisis, which makes either TANAP or TAPI the most important option for their intensification. Now, on the other crisis, Kazakhstan, Kashagan has been a big blow for the Nazarbayev regime. They have put virtually all of their oil eggs in that basket. And when they realize that the extraction is a very expensive endeavor, as well as they need to repiping because of the high sulfur and things like that, at a time in which oil prices went down over 6 months, that created a big blow for the budget. When the crisis began, Kazakhstan was budgeting at 110. Of course, there was surprises back then. They thought that anything over 60 was profitable. They now had to budget around 50, and they realized that since they're selling less oil, they're losing money rather than making money. Now, this has a big impact on the regime worldview. If you look at the rhetoric in Kazakhstan, which is very authoritarian state, but still somehow with a few elements of the Western political discourse, the regime has always been very interested in selling an image to the people of Kazakhstan. In fact, Nazarbayev sold this dream of middle-class fulfillment. And if you go to Kazakhstan, you realize that the infrastructure is getting better, that there is some wealth going on, at least in the urban centers. But in the last couple of years, with low oil prices, this dream is quickly vanishing, which instigates in turn a whole series of problems when it comes to issues of loyalty, legitimacy, and continuity in terms of where will come after Nazarbayev, because it's an aging leader anyway. So this is the twin crisis that I see in Central Asia. What is funny, and I find very paradoxical, thinking about what you asked the colleagues before about EU and EU, that when it comes to the Eurasian Economic Union, of course that's true for Kazakhstan, not for Turkmenistan, who's not a member. When it comes to the Eurasian Economic Union, which has got its own institution, its own norms, if you want, its own framework, energy is not dealt with. It's out of the agenda. On the other hand, when it comes to the European Union, where you have a somehow shaky framework, because we know that Kazakhstan is going for the PCA 2.0, but Turkmenistan is still regulated by a Soviet time agreement. There is no PCA signed there. Energy is the cornerstone of the agenda. There's a very big disbalance between what they say they want to do and what they are actually doing, which is a common thread in Central Asia foreign policy making. However, when it comes to relation to third parties, big multilateral parties or organizations that have a wider goal in the region, placing or misplacing, as in the case of the EU, energy, which is 86% Turkmenistan of the revenues, in Kazakhstan is very high as well, creates a complex and flawed, if you want, engagement agenda with the two, especially at a time in which either state is serious about diversification. Now, this morning Nazarbayev has had this annual statement, and I just caught a few glimpses. And at one point he said, this year we only grow by 1.5%, which of course, in my own country, Italy, would be great, but that's not the case. He said we need to get 5%. That's the kind of dream which I was talking about before. 5% with oil at 48, 49, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen at all. So the point is that that kind of dream is very much eroded, and it's no longer about bandwagoning or who being friends with or who making deals with. It's about realizing that not only these resources are finite, that one day they will run out, but also that these regimes might be finite in the ways that they need to work out a continuity agenda which goes beyond repression and fear.
Thank you very much. I wonder now whether Dr. Mukan or Dr. Sri, whether you would like to react to any of the remarks.
I mean, the thing he mentioned about the diversification and the price of the oil and gas is, of course, is a problem. And because these countries are, as he mentioned about the number, 85% and more, it's kind of, they have Dutch disease. So this is the problem which they have. The other point which we need to mention, maybe related to Central Asia, the aging the leaders like Nazarbayev and the Kerimov, and these leaders are leading their countries more than 25 years, almost 30 years, some. And in this, we don't know what will happen after these leaders passed away. That's other, maybe we need to mention things important. Yes, the countries are still, the process of state building and nation building process are not finished yet. And that is also causing the problem. He mentioned about the Turkmenistan has export crisis. Turkmenistan had export crisis before 2008 when the Russian decreased the level of the natural gas buying from Turkmenistan.
But the price was high.
Price was high, yes, that's true. Then Turkmenistan looked for alternative and they find the alternative from China. And until this time, 3 pipeline is built, and the 4th one is the continued. I agree with him. Turkmenistan is also, as 15 days ago I was in Turkmenistan, they are also aware of that. They need to diversify their pipeline, but you are right, then the price is low. So this is what they have. And the prediction about the future of the natural gas market is comparing the oil market is more better prediction there are. Of course, technological development, the Americans developed a new technology and decreasing their dependence on the oil and gas from other countries, also keeping the price low. And as we know, the price of natural gas and oil also related with the Russian relation with the Western countries this time. So we don't know yet what will happen in that area.
Dr. Mukan, any remarks?
Yeah, I just about energy issues was said. Actually, I agree with that. I would like to point out again to go back to the Eurasian Economic Union project in terms of the understanding clearly the projects in terms of the value of this project at all. Of course, as my colleague mentions about the Eurasian, the concept of Eurasianism is, of course, it is different for Putin and different for Nazarbayev, and in these cases, the purely economic component of this union is really important from the Kazakhs' perspective. Not turn back to this kind of the ideological aspects that Eurasianism has is in its sense, like Gumilev, Trubetsky, or yes, that run by them. In terms of when we're talking about the Eurasian Economic Union, of course, directly it comes through Kazakhstan-Russian relationships in all levels. It could be economic levels or political levels. So in this sense, as I would like to point out, that in this case, the announcement and the message by Nazarbayev, that even today also is that, I mean, is taking place in Astana now, actually, and the clear message that whatever is happening in neighboring countries or in the international arena, Kazakhstan has its own multi-vector policy, even though it was really for expert communities in Kazakhstan and abroad also, it really was just a surprise for Kazakh leadership that Kazakhstan became a neutral position. I mean, has a neutral position in UN General Assembly voting in Crimea annexation by Russia, whereas other allies in Eurasian Economic Union like Armenia and Belarus also voted for benefit of the Russian position, which is also the creates, despite of the close relations and cross-border relations with Kazakhstan and Russia, and the Nazarbayev says that in some cases says no, we would have to stay neutral. The same case with the Georgian-Russia war in 2008, also the same story. So in this sense, just I would like to point out that that kind of perceptions that, of course, Eurasian Union is somehow, it's like is a restoration of Soviet Union or restorations of the values that took place in Soviet Union. I just absolutely disagree with this. I mean, basically, this is some kind of purely economic project that, of course, was mentioned by my colleagues. So, about energy issues, actually, I really agree with those that was said before. Oil prices really, I mean, the decrease in the oil prices is quietly just affected Kazakhstan's economy. We have very big inflation now since 20th of August. About the 50% of national currency devaluated, and that is so anti-crisis measures is taking place. Actually, it is of today's the message to the nations by President. Actually, we will see that what will happen and in next years actually. So at least there are some the anti-crisis measure is taking place despite of the meaning that the Expo 2017 is going to be in Astana actually, and maybe some of the projects will within the constructions of the Expo and the providing the Expo will be cut down actually because of the crisis. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I guess we have been talking here enough in front, and I would like actually to throw it open to the audience and invite you to ask questions. And when you ask a question, please state also briefly who you are. Okay, since nobody else, then Jeanette with the first question. Okay, the next is to you. You get the mic so that you don't get mine.
Okay, thank you, Janet Ozoling. I wanted to ask a question to Saken. It's more hypothetical, so we are both from academia, so we can allow ourselves to speculate a little bit. So putting together different views expressed before, so China definitely is on the map in Central Asia. And on the one hand, we have Russia's vision of Eurasian Economic Union, which is very much geopolitical. Then there is a Kazakh view, which is more economic. And then China is marching west, or one belt, one road, whatever you call it, or Silk Road. So China comes more with economic interests. Of course, security and stability is somewhere there, but still economy is one of the priorities. You don't see there a possibility of clash of interests between China's interest in Central Asia and also Russia's interest in Central Asia. So if China's presence is increasing, what could be reaction? Not so much from Russia's side, because we've seen it already with Eastern Partnership, but what would happen with Central Asian countries? What would be their reactions? So could you please a little bit speculate on that?
Thank you very much, Professor Zornia. Actually, the project of Eurasian Economic Union itself is that decreasing the Chinese presence in Central Asia, if we say in short words. Eurasian Economic Union itself actually maintains the collaborations within its memberships, as EU is the same project actually, but in terms of the China presence in Central Asia, I would say that mostly, personally, I pay attention on the pipeline projects, basically, which is quite popular, actually, actions in terms of the Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, especially, to diversify its pipeline projects, not only Russian directions or other Middle Eastern directions, etc. So my answer is just the Eurasian Economic Union, and actually as I'm Kazakhstanian, actually I feel and I see that after the joining the Eurasian Economic Union, I feel as a citizen of Kazakhstan that the Chinese products, the prices for Chinese goods in Kazakhstan, in Almaty, the price increased, or they somehow limited in terms of the quantity of the Chinese goods. And we see, as a citizens of this country, I see that the Russian products became more, and of course the cheap, really. So in this sense, that my answer would be that the Eurasian Economic Union, from Kazakh view, this is basically that restrict the cheap Chinese products to Central Asia. And my colleague has also elaborated on terms of the decreasing the level of the re-exportings, like Kyrgyz and those goods that comes from China to Kurdistan, and they would be re-exported actually to other Central Asian countries, and especially to Kazakhstan. Actually, the same happened with Belarus when the sanctions against Russia took place. That also Belarus played such kind of roles with the re-exporting the goods. But the tendency it happens when there is re-exporting, but anyhow, we see the limits of Chinese products that is coming to Central Asia. But in fact, if you interview the citizens of, if I speak from the Kazakh perspective, Kazakhstan people would choose the maybe Russian products, but less Chinese products, as soon as the majority of the, as I said before, basically the Western China, actually the main producers that are coming to coming to Central Asian countries, they are from the Western China, where it's not well developed in comparison with the Eastern China. So that's my point. Thank you.
I see other panelists also want to react to Janet's question. So, Ambassador, why don't we start with you?
I think one of the things that we have to emphasize is demographics. And when you look at both Russia and Kazakhstan, they have a downward trend. And who's going to supply the demographics or the population? I mean, you have vast land with all the natural resources and the sinking population. and it is,
Would Turkey supply?
we are supplying Europe. I think it will be the Chinese who will be supplying the demographics. We have to, look at that number one. And the second thing is China works very effectively and very wisely. It happens slowly. But when you look at the technologies involved, the technology which is brought in by China, by Japan, by Korea, are much more superior than what is available from Russia. And when you look at the trade figures, yes, Russia has made great inroads into Kazakhstan because of this agreement. And it has worked very much against the interests of Kazakhstan. But the thing is, in the long run, Russia cannot produce the same wares with the same price. Even with the tariffs which are introduced against China, it will still be very, very, the rivalry will be very intense.
Luca, you also wanted to add something.
I know that the question was posed as an hypothesis, but I would, and this is probably one of the biggest things in my job at the moment, I would avoid to argue in terms of either or. There is space for both Russia and China. There is space for the European Union, there is space for India, there is space for everyone. But not because it's such a big market or because the tunes that is played in terms of influences, relations, is dictated by the Central Asian presidents rather than by the foreign powers. It's been done for 25 years. They have been liaising with the US, with the Russian Federation, with China, at other times with Iran, with Turkey very strongly in the early 90s, always and exclusively with the power preservation at the best interest. So I know that is sort of, it's an interesting way of seeing things, sort of zero-sum game, but we risk not to understand what's going on in Central Asia if we keep looking at the region in those terms, especially when we have such a very sort of politically acute generations of leaders that have been able to anchor down their support to both domestic factors and external agents. And we only had to ask my Kyrgyz colleague here about Bakiev to understand what actually happens when external support goes on. So I would strongly advise anyone who studies Central Asia or thinks about Central Asia to elaborate in those terms.
Thank you. Dr. Sari, would you like to respond?
First, I would like to mention about China. Yes, China is using the economic tools, but not just economic tools. There are also security issues, security areas, cooperating bilaterally each Central Asian countries. Because China is concerned on the separatism and the radical groups, and they consider Central Asia a kind of transit place to those groups to China, Western China, Xinjiang or East Turkestan region. Then they're pushing the Central Asian countries to sign the agreement, not just economic one, but the security issues. Economic area, China has the two level policy. One is to establishing a kind of Silk Road, so then all Central Asian countries can involve. One of the projects is the Turkmenistan's. This is Silk Road is not just a road. This is roads, highways, railroads, pipelines, and also digital Silk Road. So these the China trying to connect, so Chinese products and ideas can transfer to other countries, and products and some certain level also this Chinese security concern too. But also pipeline, which I mentioned, Turkmenistan. The fourth one is passing starting from Turkmenistan, passing through all Central Asian, Kazakhstan, Kurdistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, then ending the China. This is construction is the continue. So this is the China's strategically, especially they wanted that pipeline to build. That way, the Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan will get the transit fee, which is around $200–300 million, but that's good money for them. So that becomes more dependent on the China in that sense. That's the I want to add.
Thank you. So there was one more question here.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Olga Speiser from Sciences Po Paris. My question is for Luca, but all the others are free to comment. Actually, I wonder that we have talked so far not so much about Iran. You have mentioned briefly the crucial importance of Iran for being a potential export transportation hub for Central Asia. I remind you that Iran is provides the shortest route to the sea for Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan. However, we knew that this potential was restricted by the sanctions, but now that the sanctions have been relaxed this year, we should maybe more think about the post-sanction scenario, and you have briefly mentioned that, but maybe I'd like to dig further. How do you assess actually this post-sanction scenario? Is Iran really the next exportation hub for Central Asia, for Caspian Central Asia, I have to specify, especially as you mentioned, for Turkmenistan, maybe to ease its dependence of China. And maybe another factor that I'd like to know your opinion about is the fact that Central Asian gas exporters lag behind in terms of technology, especially in the domain of LNG, liquefied natural gas. So what does that mean for the future for gas export for Central Asia and for Turkmenistan too? Thank you.
Okay, please.
First of all, I think that if you look at the way in which they're behaving, the post-sanction seems more and more likely. So they're behaving quite well. So there is a possibility that the sanction will be lifted anytime soon, which is a good development for Central Asia. On the other hand, though, the way in which the Iranian economy will be structured, in which you will have a very strong private sector, will be an economy that would be happy to have low oil prices and in turn low oil or gas prices, which is not good for Central Asia. Having said that, you are right. That's the quickest way to get to the Gulf. It's the quickest way to get to the sea. But it's also a market that does not have a compatible energy outlook because Iran is an exporter as well. So they would be competitors in that sense. It will open the possibility for Turkmenistan to go through Iran, bypassing Afghanistan and reaching the subcontinent if that's what really they want to do, with the India and Pakistan as sort of the demand-driven customers. But that's a bit of a long shot. So I think that we need to see also what kind of policy they will have. They will use their gas for domestic purposes. They will keep exporting. They will export most oil. This is still not sure, also because there is a bit of a foreign policy making turmoil in Iran. You know, that's a very fluid society, very composite elite, which to some extent decides in a way which is very different from the way in which Central Asia decides. It's very personalized, president-central decision-making processes. Just a quick answer, Olga, to your LNG. There is no way Turkmenistan can make LNG. This won't happen for the next 30 years. The gas is poor to start with, and then even if you have somehow the know-how, export is a nightmare because of the fact that there is no sea, anyway. So I would not see that happening, which is a good thing because it means that they know that they're not going to waste more money in that, because they know to waste money in the pharaonic projects that never work, Eirāzijas and things like that. But on the other hand, it limits them to the tyranny of distance, which is what regulates pipeline politics in Central Asia. Virtual pipeline, which is very important for Turkmenistan, and vital pipelines, which is this division I've been trying to make in my work at the moment. That really looks at how they're transforming their idea of export into a series of open-up policy that actually has always at their core effect that anyone would like to say in Parliament.
Would anybody else?
We looked into the potential for Iranian ports because they are building another port south of Bandar Abbas. The thing is, it's a one-way trade. I mean, yes, you will have export products from India and from other countries going through there, through the Caspian Sea to Russia, and probably some to Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan. But the thing is, nothing is coming down. So to be able to have a vital and a viable transport route, you need cargo on both directions. Unfortunately, all of these countries only export. The same thing with Russia. They don't export goods that would fill the vacancy for the return traffic to Iran.
Thank you. So all good things are three in Latvia at least. So we have one more in the back, please. Yeah.
Italian investor.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, say who you are. I know who you are, but others probably don't.
Sebastiano Fulci, the new Italian ambassador here in Riga. So I'm happy to have a professor who comes from my country here.
I believe they have 15 years though, don't get too excited.
But so I just wanted to make a remark on what you said concerning the 30 years, expectation on development of LNG exports. I mean, it's true in the US there are issues, but we have this shale gas that is really cheap and inexpensive, and of course the issue is the issue of cost because there is a process of liquids. You have to get the gas liquid, so there are some of course some machines, some installations that are being built in some US harbors in order to do that. So you have to liquefy the gas, and then it has to cross the Atlantic, and then it has to be regasified. So of course this process is costly. But on the other hand, I see also the market prices of shale gas in the US are really low. Actually, I come from there. I was in Washington, D.C. I also wondered why...
Sorry, Ambassador, but I guess the comment, Luca's comment was about Turkmeni liquefied natural gas.
I'm sorry. So and then my remark would be, what do you think about the possibility of the U.S. exporting their shale gas to Europe?
Look, I don't really work on demand from Europe. It's to be too much, but I just want to return to. I want to try to link your comment, Ambassador, with what my colleagues were saying before. Central Asia is crucial for the demand that we have in the West, and it's a demand which is geographically located on the land mass because there is no LNG, no shale. It has to come to a pipeline. TANAP, TAPI, whatever it is, has to be a pipeline, which is probably where the biggest part of the effort in the next 25 years would be. As you mentioned before, there is this either or which doesn't really add up, but there is only one context in which seeing Central Asia as either or makes sense, and it's pipeline in terms of supply. Turkmenistan does not have the capacity to support both TANAP and TAPI. Kazakhstan does not have the capacity to sell as much gas as it does with Europe, which, by the way, it's as much as Saudi Arabia does, to expand to Japan and stuff like that. There are limits in the demands because these are significant energy economies, but they're never as significant as Russia or as Saudi Arabia on the other hand. So it shows to me that the connection between stability of the regime, international oil prices, European demand, and capacity is this sort of quadrangle in which much of the, if you want, international relations of the region will be happening. And it's very crucial to understand what peripheral internal geography, Ambassador, no important actors like Turkey would do in this, or of course what more distant actors like Germany, or in our case of Italy. With last week we just got any deal in Turkmenistan, which opens question of transparency, open questions of things we probably wouldn't like to go into at the moment. But it's interesting how it all happens in this quadrangle of supply, demand, stability, and prices.
Thank you very much. So I'm afraid we have exceeded actually a little bit already the time that was allocated to this panel. I think it was indeed a very, very interesting panel. So I would like to thank all the speakers for coming and sharing their points of view. And I guess before we have coffee downstairs, they deserve a round of applause. Thank you. So we have a coffee break until 12.